Forgetting her house keys on her fiancé's desk, Jackie went back to the now empty office. But as she approached his door, she heard two secretaries whispering about him and froze in place. "Hello there. Tell me in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like. Enjoy listening." I walked out of the Malcolm Tower office building and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. My heart felt light and calm, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The last few months had been chaotic: wedding preparations, the non-stop work at our family company, and constant worries about my father's health. But tonight, all of that faded into the background. Malcolm and I had just been sitting in his office, drinking tea and making plans. Not about work, not about supplies or contracts, about us. Our future home. Our honeymoon. He held my hand, looked into my eyes, and I felt like the happiest woman alive. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Jackie," he said before I left, and I believed every word. Malcolm Blackwood. Successful, charismatic, the director of the biggest construction company in the city. My father, Warren Wyeth, adored him. He didn't just see Malcolm as a future son-in-law, he saw him as a trusted partner, a successor who would help our building materials company reach new heights. For my father, that was everything: his business, his legacy. And Malcolm fit perfectly into that picture. He was my rock, my father's hope. And I loved him. Loved him so deeply that my heart felt ready to burst from happiness. I reached my car in the nearly empty parking lot and pressed the key fob. Silence. Pressed again, nothing. I checked my purse, emptied it into my palm: lipstick, phone, wallet. No keys. Neither house nor car keys. Damn it. I'd left them on Malcolm's desk, I remembered clearly. I'd set them down next to his planner when I pulled out my phone. Well, no big deal. The guard at the entrance knows me, the elevators still work. Malcolm had left for a meeting with investors just 5 minutes before me, so the office was probably empty by now. A quiet hallway, no one around. I'd just grab the keys and go home. I went back inside. The elderly security guard, Clark, nodded at me like an old friend. "Forgot something, Jackie?" "Yeah, my keys, Clark." Scatterbrained as always, I smiled and walked to the elevators. Malcolm's floor was dark and quiet, lit only by the dim corridor lights. My footsteps echoed off the walls. That kind of silence always made me uneasy. During the day, the place buzzed with life, phones ringing, people rushing everywhere. But at night, it felt deserted, like a concrete tomb. I was almost at his office door, a massive dark wood one with a shiny plaque that read Malcolm Blackwood, CEO, when I heard voices. Low, muffled voices from inside. I froze, listening. Women's voices, his two secretaries, Kate and Helen. What were they doing here so late? The workday had ended hours ago. I took a step back into the shadows so they wouldn't see me if they came out. My heart started beating faster. There was nothing strange about employees working overtime, but their tone, it wasn't businesslike. It was a whisper. Gossip. Can you believe it? In the Phoenix Tower, one said, sounded like Kate. Top floor, panoramic windows across the whole city. I saw the lease today when I brought it for him to sign. You're kidding, gasped Helen. That's huge. What, is he planning a surprise for Jackie? A wedding gift? Warmth spread through me. A surprise? Of course. That was so like Malcolm, grand gestures. An apartment in the most prestigious building in the city. I could already picture us standing by a huge window, wrapped in each other's arms, looking at the city lights. I smiled at the thought and was about to step out of the shadows, knock, and interrupt their chatter. But what Kate said next made my blood run cold. Don't be naive, Helen. The name on that lease wasn't hers. And he made it clear, strict confidentiality. No one, not a single soul, is supposed to know. Said it was personal. Personal? Helen's voice was a mix of surprise and excitement. You mean it's for someone else? Wow. So he's seeing another woman? Right before the wedding? Shoo, hissed Kate. Walls have ears. Not our business. But facts are facts, a luxury apartment, and definitely not for the fiancé. Some lucky girl, huh? Their voices faded. I stood there, pressed against the wall, unable to move. The blood drained from my face. What did that even mean? What nonsense were they talking about? Kate and Helen were known gossips, they always exaggerated. They must have misunderstood something. Maybe it was a place for a visiting business partner, or an investment property for a new project. There had to be a reasonable explanation. There had to be. I heard the door click open and quickly stepped farther into the shadows. The secretary slipped out, glanced around, and hurried down the hall toward the stairs. They didn't see me. I waited until their footsteps faded. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. My hands were ice cold. I should have just turned around and left. Called Malcolm and asked him directly. But I couldn't. The words "not for the fiancé" and "some lucky girl" were stuck in my head like poison. I stepped up to the door. In my purse, in the side pocket, was a spare key to his office. Malcolm had given it to me a couple of months ago, in case I ever needed to grab some documents while he was away. "You're the lady of this place, Jackie," he told me then. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the lock. It clicked softly. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The room smelled like his cologne and freshly brewed coffee. Everything was in its place. Perfect order. On the massive polished desk lay neat stacks of papers. To the side stood our photo in a silver frame, us on vacation, happy, sun-kissed. I looked at the picture, and my throat tightened. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a terrible misunderstanding. My keys were right where I'd left them, beside his planner. I picked them up, the cold metal bit into my palm. I should leave. Right now. But I couldn't move. My eyes were fixed on the desk, on those stacks of papers. I needed to be sure. I needed to prove that Kate and Helen were just fools misreading some business deal. I started going through the papers. Contracts, budgets, proposals, everything looked normal. Nothing suspicious. And then, under a folder labeled City Quarter Project, I saw it. A folded document on thick, embossed paper. On top was the logo of a well-known luxury real estate agency. A lease agreement. My heart stopped, then started pounding twice as fast. There it was. I picked it up slowly, as if it might burn me, and unfolded it. Address, Central Avenue, Building 1, Phoenix Tower. It matched perfectly. I scanned the lines, looking for my name. I was sure I'd see it, Jackie Wyeth. Then I'd laugh at myself, at how foolish and paranoid I'd been. I'd call Malcolm, tell him how stupid I felt for eavesdropping on gossip, and we'd laugh about it together. But my name wasn't there. I kept reading the line that said tenant, again and again, but the letters were different. Unfamiliar. No, not unfamiliar. I forced myself to read it slowly, syllable by syllable, until my brain finally caught up with what my eyes were seeing. Tenant, Bella Wyeth. Bella. My younger sister. I gripped the contract so tightly that the paper dug into my skin. The air in the office grew thick and heavy, I could barely breathe. Bella. It wasn't some random woman. Not a mistake, not a typo. My sister. I don't remember how I left the office, or how I made it to the elevator, or down the stairs. The guard, Uncle Clark, said something to me on the way out, but I didn't hear a word. The world had narrowed down to that folded sheet of paper burning a hole in my purse. I got into my car, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys several times before finally managing to start the engine. Where should I go? Home? Call Malcolm? No. I needed to see her. I needed to look her in the eye and hear what she'd say. I sped out of the parking lot, pressing the gas pedal all the way down. City lights blurred into streaks of color. Blood roared in my ears, drowning out the sound of the engine. Some small, rational part of me whispered there had to be an explanation, something simple, something logical. But another part, louder and raw, screamed in pain and disbelief. Bella. My little sister. The one I'd always protected. She lived in a new district on the other side of town. I got there in 15 minutes, breaking every traffic rule possible. I didn't ring the intercom. I waited until someone came out and slipped inside. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, refusing to wait for the elevator. I couldn't wait another second. I stopped in front of her door and took a few deep breaths, trying to stop trembling. Then I knocked, hard. Not like a guest, but like someone whose world was falling apart. It felt like forever before I heard footsteps inside. The lock clicked, and Bella appeared in the doorway. She was in loungewear, soft pants, a t-shirt, her hair tied up in a messy bun. Without makeup, she looked almost childlike. When she saw me, her eyebrows lifted in surprise. Jackie? What's wrong? Why are you knocking like that? Without a word, I stepped inside, forcing her to back up. I didn't look around, didn't take off my shoes. I just stared at her. I pulled the contract from my purse and handed it to her. What's this? My voice sounded rough and unfamiliar. She unfolded the paper and read it. I watched every flicker of her face, waiting to see fear, confusion, guilt, something. But there was nothing. Bella's expression didn't change at all. She finished reading, looked up, and a slow smile spread across her lips. Not guilty, not nervous, just light, almost cheerful. Jackie, oh no, you ruined it, she said so casually that I was left speechless for a moment. Ruined what? I managed to ask. The surprise, she said, throwing her hands up, sounding genuinely disappointed. It was supposed to be your and Malcolm's wedding gift. We were going to tell you at the family dinner next week. How did you even find it? I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she was saying. A gift. A surprise. It sounded so reasonable. So simple. Exactly the kind of explanation I'd wanted to believe. But why your name? On the lease? Oh my God, Jackie, you're such a child, she laughed. Malcolm asked me to put it under my name so you wouldn't suspect anything. He knew you sometimes help him with paperwork. You might have seen it if it had your name or his. But mine? You'd never guess. It was basic secrecy. He really wanted to surprise you. And here you are, barging in like a storm, looking at me like I stole your man. She said the last part with a laugh, but something sharp flickered in her eyes, like a tiny needle. She looked at me with feigned disappointment, and I felt my anger melt into shame. Hot, sticky shame for doubting her, for jumping to conclusions, for suspecting Malcolm. I lowered my gaze. The contract in her hands no longer looked like proof of betrayal, it looked like proof of my own foolishness. I'm sorry, I whispered. Bella, I'm so sorry. I overheard his secretaries talking. They said the apartment wasn't for me. I don't know what came over me. I guess it's just the wedding stress. Exactly, just nerves, she said softly, putting an arm around my shoulders. You need to relax. Well, now that the surprise is ruined, at least tell me, what do you think of the gift? Phoenix Tower, top floor. Malcolm said you've always dreamed of a place like that. Her words felt like a bomb. Of course. Everything was fine. I was just being ridiculous. I nodded, forcing a grateful smile. Yes, I have. It's incredible. Thank you. It's all Malcolm, I just helped, she said modestly. I stayed for about 10 more minutes. We had tea. Bella chatted happily about the apartment, the renovations it needed, how wonderful it would be for Malcolm and me. I sat there nodding, feeling the tension slowly ease. But deep down, under the layers of relief and shame, something cold stirred, a tiny worm of doubt. Something felt off. Her reaction had been too quick. Too perfect. The explanation, too smooth. When I got up to leave, she handed me a small key on a keychain. Here, Take it. It's for the apartment. Since you already know, you might as well go see it. The building concierge has the main entrance key. Just tell him your name, he'll give it to you. Malcolm arranged everything. Go see your little love nest. I took the key. It was cold and heavy in my hand. I drove toward home but didn't pull into the parking garage. I stopped at the curb and turned off the engine. I sat in silence, staring at the key lying on the passenger seat. I should have gone home, called Malcolm, and apologized for my suspicions. But I couldn't. The doubt I'd been trying to smother kept spreading through me like poison. I had to be sure. Not because I didn't believe them, but to prove to myself that I was wrong. To finally shake this filthy feeling. I just wanted to look at the gift. Alone. To pull myself together. I started the car again and headed to the address on the lease. Phoenix Tower rose over the city like a glass giant. Everything here screamed luxury and status. A marble lobby, soft expensive music, an impeccably dressed concierge at the desk. Good evening, I said, trying to sound calm. Wyeth. There should be a key left for me. He checked something on the computer and handed me a keycard with a polite smile. Of course. 25th floor. Right this way. My ears popped in the express elevator. I watched the numbers climb and my heart took off again. Come on, Jackie, don't be ridiculous. You'll open the door, see an empty apartment with bare walls, feel like a complete idiot, and go home. It'll be fine. The doors slid open onto a wide hallway with a single door at the end. I walked toward it, slow and careful. I held the keycard to the lock, then used the key Bella had given me. The lock clicked softly. I pushed the door and stepped inside. A huge living room unfolded before me, with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below sparkled with 1,000 lights. The view was breathtaking. But I barely looked at it. I was listening. Because the moment I stepped in, I heard it, low, muffled sounds. Voices. From deeper inside the apartment. From the bedroom. I froze. My whole body went cold. That couldn't be. Maybe workers. Or agents. I slipped off my heels so they wouldn't click and tiptoed down the hall. The sounds got clearer. A woman's laugh. And a low, painfully familiar male voice. Malcolm's voice. The bedroom door was cracked open. I moved closer and peered through the gap. My heart stopped. Malcolm stood with his back to me, shirtless, pouring champagne into 2 flutes. And on the massive, unmade bed, propping her head on her hand, sat Bella. She was wearing only a thin silk robe that barely covered her body. She gazed at Malcolm and laughed. The scene was so intimate, so obvious, there was no room for doubt. This wasn't a business talk. This was their nest. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I made a sound. Maybe it was just a feeling. But Bella suddenly turned her head and looked straight at the door. Straight at me. Our eyes locked. I expected shock on her face. Horror. Panic. But there was none of that. Her smile slowly faded. She stared at me across the room. And in her eyes there was no shame, no fear. Just a single, crystalline moment that said everything. Bella wasn't ashamed, she was savoring it. She'd won. Noticing her change, Malcolm turned. He saw me. The glass slipped from his hand and thudded into the thick carpet. Champagne spread in a dark stain. Real, raw terror flashed across his face. Jackie, he breathed, and I just spun around and ran. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't breathe the same air as them. I bolted out of the apartment, not even thinking, leaving my shoes in the entryway. I flew barefoot across the cold marble of the lobby, past the stunned concierge, and burst into the street. The cold asphalt burned my feet. I reached my car, slid behind the wheel, and screamed. Loud, desperate, until my throat hurt. It wasn't a scream of rage, it was an animal scream of pain. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes, an hour, time stopped. Then I started the car and drove. Aimlessly. Through the night, until I ran out of gas. I pulled over on some dark, unfamiliar street. My phone kept buzzing in my bag. Dozens of missed calls. All from Malcolm. I stared at the glowing screen, at his name, and felt nothing. A cold, scorched emptiness. Eventually, I went home. To the apartment where we'd planned to live after the wedding. Where everything reminded me of him. I walked in and collapsed on the couch without turning on the lights. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was. I didn't want to open it. But the ringing didn't stop. It turned into a relentless, frantic knock. "Jackie, open up. I'm begging you. Let me explain." His voice came through the door, muffled, pleading. I didn't want to listen. Didn't want to see him. But he wouldn't leave. He kept knocking, and I was afraid the neighbors would call the police. I got up slowly, went to the door, and turned the lock. He stood there on the threshold, disheveled, eyes red. Wearing the very shirt I'd given him for his last birthday. He stepped inside, and I backed away, keeping my distance. "Don't come near me," I said. My voice was steady, without a tremor. "Jackie, it's not what you think. I swear it's not." He took another step. "I saw you, Malcolm. I saw everything. You. Her. In a silk robe. On the bed. What exactly is there to misunderstand?" The words came out sharp, poisonous. "She's crazy," he blurted. "She's obsessed with me. She's been stalking me for months, calls, texts, threats. I didn't know what to do. She called today and said if I didn't come, she'd hurt herself. I went there to end it once and for all. To tell her there's nothing between us and there never will be. I love only you, Jackie. Only you." He spoke fast, stumbling over the words, eyes darting. He looked like the victim. A carefully painted picture, the noble man trying to save the unstable, misguided sister of his fiancé. I looked at him and almost believed it. I wanted to believe so badly. Because the alternative was unbearable. "And the apartment?" I asked, clinging to the last thread. "And her lie about the gift? That was all her. She orchestrated it. She found out I was looking for a place for us, got involved, put everything in her name to lure me there. She's playing with us, Jackie. She wants to destroy us. She's always been jealous of you, you know that." He kept talking, and I pictured Bella. Her constant need to be the center of attention, her tantrums, her talent for getting her way at any cost. Yes, she'd always been jealous. Of my work, of my relationship with our father. Could she really be capable of this? Of such elaborate, cruel deception? Malcolm moved closer. This time I didn't step back. He gently took my hands in his. His palms were hot. "Jackie, look at me. I love you. I want to marry you." I yanked my hands free. "Get out, Malcolm. Please, just go. I need to think." "No." His voice hardened. "We can't leave it like this. It's not just about us. It's about our families. Your father. Imagine what will happen if he hears your version of events. His heart, we can't take that risk. We need to go to him. Together. And clear this up." He was right. My father, his weak heart. His last heart attack had been only 6 months ago, and the doctors warned that any serious stress could be his last. A scandal, a broken engagement, a war between his daughters, it could kill him. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, feeling the icy resolve inside me start to melt under the weight of fear for my father. Go to him in the middle of the night and tell him his younger daughter is insane and throwing herself at my fiancé? "We'll tell him the truth," Malcolm said firmly. "We'll say there was a misunderstanding. That Bella got a little confused. That you misunderstood the situation. We'll smooth it out quietly, as a family. For his sake. Please, Jackie. Let's go. I didn't want to go. I wanted to crawl into a corner and disappear. But the thought of my father, his pale face on that hospital pillow, made me stand up. Malcolm was right. My father's health came first. We drove to my parents' house in silence. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, my thoughts a tangled mess. I didn't know what to believe anymore. On one side was Bella's cold, triumphant stare. On the other, Malcolm's desperate, convincing words and the very real threat to my father's life. When we pulled up to the house, I saw light coming from my father's office window. Strange. He usually went to bed early. A chill of dread crept up my spine. We stepped inside. In the hallway, hanging on the coat rack, was Malcolm's coat. A different one, the one he'd worn earlier that day. That meant he'd already been here. He'd come before me. We walked into the office. My father was sitting at his massive oak desk. He looked older, more tired than usual. He lifted his heavy gaze to me, and there was no warmth in his eyes, no concern, no sympathy. Only cold, hard disappointment. Father, I began, but he cut me off. Silence, Jackie, he said quietly, his voice sharp as steel. He had never spoken to me like that before. Malcolm has already told me everything. I turned to look at Malcolm. He stood beside the desk with his head bowed, the picture of sorrow and regret. He'd beaten me to it. He'd told his version first. He told you his lies. I shouted as despair surged through me. Dad, you have to listen to me. I saw them. Together. I've heard enough, my father said coldly. I've heard about your hysterics. Your wild accusations. About how you stormed into your sister's apartment, then caused a scene in the flat Malcolm prepared for you as a gift. Have you lost your mind, Jackie? Do you even realize what you're doing? I froze. The words caught in my throat. He had turned everything around. Every action, every step I'd taken, he twisted them into signs of madness. Dad, that's not true. She was in a robe, and he was shirtless. Enough. He slammed his palm on the desk. The dishes on the tray rattled. I don't want to hear another word of this filth. You're ready to destroy everything, your life, your sister's future, the family's reputation, because of some stupid jealousy? Do you know who Malcolm is to this company? He's our main partner. His contracts make up half our business. Do you want us ruined because of your delusions? He looked at me as if I were an enemy, not his daughter, but a threat to his empire, to his legacy. My feelings, my pain, none of it mattered. Only the contracts did. Only business. I forbid you to speak of this, he said, enunciating every word like a sentence. To anyone. Ever. Do you understand? This conversation is over. You'll apologize to Malcolm and your sister. And we'll never speak of this again. I stood there in the office where I'd grown up, feeling like a stranger for the first time in my life. My own father hadn't just refused to believe me, he'd taken the side of my deceitful fiancé and silenced me to protect his company. I turned and walked out without a word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. Malcolm tried to follow me, saying something about how my father was only worried, but I didn't hear him. I walked out of the house that no longer felt like home, got in my car, and drove away. The next few days passed in a fog. I didn't answer any calls, not Malcolm's, full of fake remorse and pleas for me to be reasonable, not my father's, curt and demanding, and definitely not Bella's, with her messages about how sorry she was for the awful misunderstanding. I called in sick at work and spent days lying on my couch, staring at the ceiling. The pain was unbearable. But beneath it, like embers under ashes, something else began to burn, anger. Cold, clear anger. They had all betrayed me. My fiancé. My sister. My own father. They conspired to make me look like some unhinged hysteric. They wanted me silent, obedient. But I couldn't. I wouldn't let them win. That look Bella gave me in the apartment, triumphant, victorious. Malcolm's smooth, deliberate lies. My father's ruthless focus on business, caring more about his company than his daughter. It all fit together into one ugly picture. And it wasn't just about the affair. Something deeper was happening. Something bigger. If Malcolm could lie to my face so easily, if he could manipulate my father that effortlessly, what else was he capable of? On the third day, I got out of bed. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an investigator. I went back to work, our family business, Wyeth Supply. As I walked through the familiar halls, everything felt different. I'd worked there since I was 20, rising from assistant manager to head of logistics. I knew this business inside and out. It was my life, my future. But now I saw it through new eyes, the eyes of someone looking for cracks beneath the surface. My office. My desk. My files. Everything seemed normal. But I knew somewhere in those papers, in those numbers, lay the truth. If Malcolm had deceived me personally, he was probably deceiving us professionally, too. I didn't know where to start. All the contracts with Malcolm's company went through me. I'd seen all the invoices. On paper, everything was flawless. Our firm supplied his construction projects with the best materials, top-grade cement, steel, brick. He was our biggest client, just like my father had said. His orders kept us afloat. I sat there flipping through folders, feeling like I was going in circles. I needed someone who could look at these numbers differently, someone who saw not just contracts, but the flow of money. And then I remembered. Miriam, our chief accountant. An old-school woman who'd been with my father since the company was founded. Fiercely loyal to him, sharp as a blade, and utterly intolerant of any mess in the books. A couple of months ago, when Malcolm suggested we switch to a new, modern electronic tracking system for our supplies, I remembered Miriam muttering under her breath, "Modern means murky." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now those words echoed in my head. I grabbed the folder with the latest Blackwood contracts and headed to accounting. Miriam's office was buried in paper, as always. She sat behind her desk, glasses perched on the tip of her nose, clicking away on an old-fashioned calculator. She hated computers. "Miriam, can I have a minute?" She looked up at me with her sharp, intelligent eyes. She had, of course, already heard the gossip about my fallout with Malcolm. News in our office traveled faster than sound. But she said nothing, just gave a small nod. I closed the door behind me. "Miriam, I need your help. And this has to stay between us." She steadied me over her glasses. Her face didn't show surprise, more like quiet alertness. As if she'd been expecting this talk for a while. "I'm listening, Jackie. I want you to check all our shipments for Blackwood Construction over the past 6 months. Every single one. Invoices, delivery notes, acceptance reports. Everything." I didn't explain. I didn't tell her about the affair, or my sister, or my father. I just looked her straight in the eye, and she seemed to understand. She didn't ask a single question. She simply took the folder from my hands and said, "All right. Leave it with me. Come back tomorrow by the end of the day." That day, and the night that followed, were the longest of my life. I tried to work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to my father's harsh words, Malcolm's lies, Bella's mocking smile. What if I really had lost my mind? What if I was chasing shadows, trying to find something that wasn't there? What if Miriam came up empty-handed, and I was just the jealous, hysterical fool everyone thought I was? The next day, right at 5, I stood outside her door again. My hands were freezing. I knocked and stepped in. Miriam was at her desk, with neat stacks of documents laid out in front of her. Her face was more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Well?" I whispered. "At first glance, everything's perfect," she began in her calm, accountant's tone. "Invoices are issued correctly. Payments come in, though with delays. Work completion reports are signed. Everything looks clean." My stomach dropped. So I was wrong. I'd started all this for nothing. But Miriam continued, and I looked up at her. There's something odd. She picked up 2 papers from different stacks. One was our invoice, stamped in blue with Wyeth Supply. The other was a delivery note signed by a foreman at one of Blackwood's sites. Look here, she said, tapping her nail against a line on the invoice. We billed them for 100 tons of M500 cement. It's all clearly stated. And here's our dispatch record, exactly 100 tons left the warehouse. She slid the second paper toward me. And this is their copy, signed upon receipt. Look at the quantity. I leaned closer and froze. In the received quantities column, it said 70. 70 tons. What is this? I asked. A typo? That's what I thought at first, Miriam said calmly. But then I pulled every delivery note from the past 6 months. And it's not a typo, Jackie. It's a pattern. She spread dozens of documents across the desk. The same story, over and over. We shipped full loads, rebar, bricks, steel beams, but in their paperwork, the quantities were always 20 to 30% lower. But how? I stammered. Then why are they paying full invoices? They're not, Miriam said, fixing me with a grave look. They're paying late. And each time, their lawyers send us a complaint about underdeliveries, claiming our delays are hurting their project timelines. Here, look. She opened another folder, this one filled with official letters from Blackwood Construction. Complaint after complaint. Due to consistent shortfalls in deliveries, we request compensation for damages. Please be informed that your outstanding debt is increasing. That's insane. I burst out. We have our own records. We can prove we delivered everything. We can, Miriam said slowly. But it would take a long legal battle. And while it's going on, we'll be listed as owing them money. We're shipping them materials, but their records show they're only receiving part of it. On paper, it looks like we're failing our obligations. Like we're the unreliable supplier. I sank into a chair. My legs wouldn't hold me. I stared at the papers, and the ugly picture that had only been a vague suspicion before now came into terrifying focus. This wasn't just theft. He wasn't simply skimming off 20 or 30% of the materials from each shipment. It was far worse. He'd been systematically, month after month, creating documentation that made us look incompetent. He was building a file of complaints so that one day he could go to my father and say, "Warren, your company can't handle it anymore. You're letting me down. You're finished." They weren't just cheating us. Malcolm had been deliberately steering our family company toward ruin. He was crafting a paper trail that would make it look like we were the problem. A perfectly calculated plan to destroy my father's life's work. I stared at the documents, trembling, not from fear, but from rage. Cold, focused rage. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. Or a broken engagement. This was war. A war for my father's legacy, for our family, for everything we'd built. "Miriam, make me copies of all this," I said, my voice steady though my chest was burning. Every document. Every invoice. Every complaint. "Already done," she said, nodding toward a thick folder at the edge of the desk. "I knew you'd ask." I picked it up. It was heavy as a brick. Heavy as evidence. Now I didn't just have suspicions. I didn't just have a woman's hysterics, as my father had called it. I had proof. Solid, undeniable proof, black and white on paper. I thanked Miriam and drove home. Not to my father's. I knew I couldn't just rush into that conversation. I had to be ready. I spent the entire night spreading out the documents, organizing them by date, by project. I wrote a short summary so that even someone far from accounting could understand everything at a glance. I was preparing for the main battle. I knew my father. He was old school, proud, stubborn at times. His trust in Malcolm was almost absolute. But one thing about him never changed: he was a businessman to his core. And he hated being deceived. Numbers and documents were sacred to him. And that's exactly what I was bringing. I was sure that once he saw this, he'd understand everything. He wouldn't be able to ignore it. This folder would open his eyes, not just to Malcolm's fraud, but to all the lies he'd told about me and Bella. The next morning, I called him. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's about business. It's important." He was silent for a moment, probably deciding whether to keep ignoring me. "Fine," he said finally, his tone dry. "Come by. Tonight. 7 o'clock. I arrived exactly at 7. The house greeted me with heavy silence. I walked straight into his office. He was sitting at his desk, just like that awful night, but this time, Malcolm wasn't there. "You have 30 minutes, he said without looking up from his papers. I silently approached and placed the folder in front of him. "Look at this." He gave me a displeased glance but opened the folder. I began to speak. Calmly. No emotions, no accusations. I simply explained what the documents meant. Here was our invoice. Here was their receipt. Here was the difference. And next month, the same pattern. And the next. I talked, and he flipped through the pages. At first his face showed skepticism. Then confusion. Then sharp focus. He stopped listening to me and started reading line by line, comparing numbers. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He picked up one document, then another, his breathing heavier each time. He reached the folder of complaints from Blackwood's lawyers. He read them one after another. And I watched his face change, growing pale, ashen. Shock. Realization. The slow horror of understanding how thoroughly and shamelessly he'd been deceived by the man he treated like a son. I fell silent. The room was quiet except for the rustle of papers. I could see it, he believed me. The ice was breaking. He looked up, and there was no coldness in his eyes anymore, only confusion and fear. He opened his mouth to say something, and at that moment the office door burst open. Bella stood in the doorway. And she wasn't alone. Beside her, in a dark suit, holding a doctor's bag, was Dr. Warden, our family physician, the one who had treated my father after his heart attack. "What's going on here?" Bella's voice sounded concerned, but her eyes gleamed with a familiar, triumphant spark. She looked at the papers on the desk, at my father's pale face, at me. "Jackie, what are you doing? Can't you see his condition? Why are you torturing him again?" My father tried to get up. "Bella, stay out of this." But Dr. Warden stepped in, gently but firmly pressing him back into the chair. "Warren, you mustn't get upset." "Not at all." He pulled out a blood pressure monitor, wrapped the cuff around my father's arm. I stood there, watching like it was some absurd play, not understanding what was happening. "What is this?" I demanded, looking at Bella. She gave me a look of deep pity. "Jackie, I didn't want it to come to this. Truly. But you've left us no choice. After your breakdown last week, Malcolm and I were really worried about Dad's health. He was already on the edge." Her tone was calm, deliberate, like she was reading out a prepared statement. "Remember, Dad, a couple of weeks ago, after your last checkup, Malcolm and I brought you some documents to sign, to take some of the workload off you? You said it was a good idea, that you could finally rest more." My father looked at her blankly. The cuff on his arm tightened, the machine beeped. "Yes, I remember. Some kind of authorization handling routine matters." "Exactly," Bella nodded. "A medical power of attorney. In case your health worsened and you needed full rest." "Dr. Warden," she turned to the doctor, "what's his blood pressure right now?" The doctor glanced at the monitor and shook his head. 180/110. Critical. He needs complete rest. No stress, no business discussions. I insist. "You see, Jackie," Bella said, her voice turning cold steel, "you're pushing him toward another heart attack. Based on the doctor's recommendation, Malcolm and I have to activate the power of attorney. From now on, all business and financial decisions will go through us. For his own good. I stared at her, and the ground seemed to vanish beneath my feet. They had planned everything. They tricked him into signing that document, presenting it as something harmless, just to lighten his workload. And now, at the most crucial moment, they were using it. That's vile. I shouted. Dad, can't you see what they're doing? They're taking your company away from you. Jackie, stop it. Bella's tone hardened. Your accusations are becoming dangerous. First you attack me and Malcolm, now you start spinning nonsense about fraud. She stepped up to the desk, picked up the folder of evidence I had spent so much time compiling, and without even looking inside, closed it with a loud, deliberate snap. All these papers of yours, she said coldly, are nonsense. Dangerous delusions. The product of your sick imagination. Dr. Warden, I think my sister could also use a professional consultation. She stood there in front of me, my little sister, smiling that icy smile, declaring me insane. She had just legally secured full control over our father's life's work. And with one gesture, she turned all my evidence into worthless paper, the ravings of a mad woman. I looked at Bella, at Dr. Warden fussing helpfully beside her, and at my father, sitting helplessly in his chair with the blood pressure cuff still on his arm, and I realized I'd lost. They trapped me completely. On one side was the legal document giving them power. On the other, a diagnosis they were ready to pin on me. Every word I said now, every move I made, would be seen through the lens of instability. You'd better leave, Miss Wyeth, the doctor said without even looking at me. The patient needs rest. The patient. He called my father the patient, as if he was no longer a man capable of making his own decisions. I took the folder from the desk. Bella didn't stop me. Why would she? It meant nothing now. I turned and walked out. This time, no one tried to follow. I sat in my car and stared through the windshield at the house. The light in my father's office went out. A moment later, the living room lights came on. I could see their silhouettes, Bella, Dr. Warden, and most likely Malcolm by now too. They were celebrating. They'd won it all, the company, the power. And worst of all, they'd silenced me. I felt completely crushed. Empty. They'd cut off every path I had. Inside the family, I was the enemy, the crazy one. Go to the police? With what? A bunch of papers my father, pressured and confused, would never stand behind? They'd just laugh in my face. Malcolm Blackwood was a respected man in this city. And I was his hysterical ex-fiancé. I went home and sat for hours staring at that folder. Was this really the end? Were they really going to win that easily? Destroy my father's company, turn him into their puppet, and paint me as the town lunatic? No. I couldn't let that happen. If I couldn't fight them from within the family, I'd take the battle outside it. Our city had one major business paper, the City Herald. And one journalist everyone knew, Owen Burton. He was famous for his investigations. He wasn't afraid of powerful people, had exposed scandals, and stripped away the masks of respectable businessmen. If anyone in this city could help me, it was him. It was a desperate move. Risky. I could destroy whatever reputation the family business still had. But what reputation was left if they were about to seize it and bankrupt it anyway? I had no choice. I got back to work. But this time, I wasn't preparing something for my father. I was building a case for an outsider. I scanned every document Miriam had given me. I wrote a short, factual letter, dry, without emotion. No mention of the affair, of Bella, or of family drama. Just business. Just the fraud. How a major construction company was systematically cheating its supplier by falsifying delivery records and fabricating debt. I never named our company. I referred to the supplier and the construction firm. But the facts spoke for themselves. Anyone familiar with local business would know exactly who it was. I created an anonymous email and, late at night, sent the letter with all attachments to Burton's personal address I found on the newspaper's website. I didn't sign it. I just wrote at the end, "This is information for your next investigation. I hope you'll do the right thing." When I hit send, I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. I'd made my move. Now all I could do was wait. The next day was torture. I didn't go to work. What for? I had no power there anymore. I stayed home, refreshing the City Herald website every few minutes. Waiting for the explosion. The headline. The article that would blow our quiet city apart. The phone calls. The lawyers rushing around. My father forced, despite all their power of attorney, to answer questions. Public pressure was the one thing they couldn't control. This was my last chance. But by evening, nothing. Just the usual local news. I tried to calm myself down. Investigations take time. They have to check facts, get comments. Maybe the article would come out tomorrow. Or the day after. I barely slept. In the morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the newspaper's site. The article was there, right on the front page. With a huge photo of Malcolm. He stood at one of his construction sites, wearing a hard hat and that confident, perfect smile. And the headline read, "Malcolm Blackwood, a pillar of the city, a reliable partner in business." My stomach dropped. I started reading. It wasn't an exposé. It was a tribute. A glowing piece about what an exceptional businessman Malcolm was, how he cared about the city, built quality housing, created jobs. And then I reached the paragraph that made my blood run cold. In these difficult economic times, the journalist wrote, Blackwood Construction not only continues to thrive but also supports local partners. According to an anonymous industry source, the company has even continued working with one of the city's oldest suppliers, despite its near collapse due to outdated family management and repeated delivery failures. I read the sentence again. And again. He'd used my information. My facts. But he'd twisted them inside out. He'd turned our company, Wyeth Supply, into a burden, a failing business that the noble Malcolm magnanimously supported. Delivery failures. That was his scheme, and now it was being painted as our incompetence. My anonymous leak had become an anonymous industry source praising Malcolm's generosity. He hadn't just blocked my attack, he'd turned my own weapon against me. My cry for help had become his PR triumph. I stared at the phone screen, at Malcolm's smiling face, unable to breathe. How? How had he done it? Had Burton, the supposed crusader for truth, really twisted it himself? Or? Then it hit me. A cold, gut-wrenching realization. Burton hadn't done any investigation. He hadn't checked a single fact. He just forwarded my email straight to the man it was about. To Malcolm. The journalist I'd pinned my last hope on was one of his people. He'd handed my weapon to the enemy, and Malcolm had used it flawlessly. He had allies everywhere. In my family. In the hospital. In the press. He'd wrapped the whole city in his web. And I was just a fly caught in it, thrashing helplessly. The phone slipped from my hands. I sat on the bed in the morning light, and the room spun around me. The web. He was everywhere. His influence, his money, his connections, all of it, weapons aimed at me. And I was completely alone. That newspaper article was the final blow. For my father, it was a public humiliation. His company, his name, his pride, all made into a joke. And, of course, I was the one to blame. It was my irrational behavior, my wild accusations that caused the scandal. I was the one who'd aired our dirty laundry. By noon, the phone rang. Not my father this time, Bella. Her voice was cold, formal, as if she were speaking to a stranger. Jackie, father asks that you come to the office. There are a few formalities to settle. I knew exactly what that meant. I understood everything. But I went. I had to look them in the eye one last time. When I walked into reception, the chatter died. Secretaries, managers, the people I'd worked beside for years, dropped their eyes. They'd all read the paper. They'd heard the gossip. To them, I was now the source of trouble, the founder's flighty daughter who nearly sank the ship. My father's office door was open. He sat behind his desk. In the visitor's chair beside him was Bella. She wore a sharp business suit, hair neatly styled. She'd already settled into the role of mistress of the house. A sheet of paper lay on the desk in front of me. A termination letter. Resignation, by my own choice. Sign it, my father said without looking up. His voice was lifeless. He was broken. Bella and Malcolm hadn't just gotten legal power over him, they had crushed his will. He was defeated. I'm not signing that, I said quietly. Fire me for cause. For absenteeism. Make something up. But I won't go voluntarily. Bella smirked. As you wish. It changes nothing. Starting tomorrow, you don't work here anymore. You can pack up your things. She said it with such obvious joy, such triumph, I wanted to, but I held myself back. I just nodded and went to my office. My office. The place I thought of as a second home. I'd closed my first deals here, celebrated wins, lived through failures. I used to think one day this office would be mine along with the company. How naive I'd been. I took a cardboard box and began packing methodically. Family photos, my favorite mug, sales awards. All of it suddenly felt like props from someone else's life. People passed by my open door. No one came in. No one said a word. They just walked past, pretending I wasn't there. It was worse than insults. It was total erasure. They were wiping me from the company's history. I pulled open the bottom drawer. Years of junk, old planners, brochures, souvenir pins. I started tossing it all into the trash without thinking. My hand hit something hard in a leather cover. I pulled it out. A photo album. I'd completely forgotten it. Our PR girl made it 5 or 6 years ago for an anniversary, photos from company events through the years. I'd flipped through it once and stuffed it in the drawer. Now, just to delay the moment I'd have to walk out for good, I sat down and opened it. The first pages were black and white. My father as a young man with his friends, standing in front of the first warehouse. The opening of the first office. There I was, a little kid, sitting on his lap in this very room. There was Bella, a sulky teenager at some celebration. I kept turning pages. Office parties, picnics, company birthdays. Familiar faces, many still working here today. People who, this morning, couldn't meet my eyes. I flipped on autopilot, barely looking. Just keeping my hands busy. And then, near the back, something snagged my attention. A photo from a summer company picnic. I remembered that day, hot sun, barbecue, volleyball. Long ago. 10 years at least. Back then, Blackwood Construction wasn't a giant, just one of many clients. He was there too. The picture showed a group of us, laughing and squinting into the sun. In the center stood Malcolm. Younger then, without the weight of importance he carries now, just a handsome, ambitious young businessman. I was about to turn the page when something made me look closer. His hand. It rested on the shoulder of the girl beside him. That girl was Bella. She must have been 22, tops. Fresh out of college. She wasn't working with us yet, just at the picnic as family. His hand was on her shoulder, but it wasn't just friendly. His fingers pressed just slightly. His head tilted toward her. And she wasn't looking at the camera like everyone else. She was looking at him. In her eyes, in the faint smile, in the way she leaned into his hand, there was something intimate. Secret, a fleeting, stolen moment the camera happened to catch. A moment none of us noticed back then. I sat frozen, staring at the faded image. I'd met Malcolm only 4 years ago. He'd courted me grandly, persistently. My father had been thrilled. I thought our story began then. But this photo told a different story. Their connection, their secret, started long before me. years before he ever asked me to dinner. This wasn't a sudden fling. It wasn't some careless affair. It was a plan, 10 years in the making. And I was just a piece of that plan. A pawn in a game they'd been playing all along. The betrayal wasn't a momentary impulse. It had lasted a decade. I carefully slid the photo from its plastic corner and tucked it into my pocket. Everything else in the box suddenly felt meaningless. I stood, left the box on the floor, and walked out. I crossed reception without looking at anyone, stepped out of the building, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. The past was ash. That photo changed everything. As long as I thought it was just an affair, just a fling, I felt pain and hurt. But now I felt cold. The icy cold of realizing just how deep and calculated their game had been. 10 years. They'd been working toward this for 10 years. My engagement, my father's trust, the contracts with our firm, each was a step in their plan. This wasn't just a shortfall scam. It was something bigger. Darker. Simply skimming 30% of materials to bankrupt us later, that was too clumsy, too risky. There had to be something else. Something that explained the complexity of it all. Where did that missing 30% of cement and rebar go on every shipment? Malcolm couldn't just sell it off the books, too obvious. So he used it. But how? I sat at home with one thought pounding in my head. If they'd planned so long and so coldly, their goal wasn't just money. Their goal was total destruction and takeover. And the paperwork scam was only a cover for something else. I needed to learn what was really happening on his sites. Not on paper, in reality. I needed someone from the inside. From his system. I started thinking. Over the years, several key people had left Malcolm. Usually he eased them out quietly with a nice severance. But there was one exception. A year ago. He was fired in a scandal, head of one of the biggest sites, a man named Clive Carson. Rumor had it he'd been caught stealing, but it got hushed up. Carson was tough, seasoned, hard to deal with. After he was fired, he supposedly tried to sue Blackwood and failed. He was bitter. He was angry. And he definitely knew a lot. Finding him wasn't easy. He was no longer in construction. But through old contacts, friends of friends, I finally got his number. I couldn't call from my own phone, Malcolm was probably monitoring it. So I went to a mall, bought a cheap flip phone and an unregistered SIM card. I called him from the parking lot, my voice trembling. Hello? Clive? Who's this? His voice was rough, annoyed. My name's Jackie Wyeth. I used to work at Wyeth Supply. There was silence on the line. I've heard of you, he said at last. Blackwood's ex-fiancé. What do you want? I need to talk to you. About Malcolm. It's important. I've got nothing to say to him, or his women, he growled. It's not personal, I said quickly. It's about materials. About the supplies. Another pause. Long and tense. Interesting, he finally muttered. All right. Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. The old brick plant across the river, in the industrial zone. You know it? Meet me at the main gate. I'll be in a gray Honda. Come alone. He hung up. The next day, I was there. The factory was abandoned, broken windows, rusted beams. The perfect place for a secret meeting. I spotted the gray Honda and parked beside it. A stocky man in his 50s stepped out, with a weathered, grim face. That was Carson. I got out. He looked me over with suspicion. Talk. I know Blackwood's been stealing materials from my family, I began bluntly. I've seen the paperwork. He's been falsifying delivery receipts. Carson gave a crooked smile. Paperwork? That's kid stuff. You think you're the first to figure that out? But I don't understand why, I pressed. The scheme's too complicated. What happens to the missing materials? He studied me for a long moment, weighing whether to trust me. He doesn't lose them, girl. He never buys them in the first place. I blinked. What do you mean, doesn't buy them? We ship everything according to contract. You ship them, he said, nodding. On paper. Your records say 100 tons of premium cement leave your warehouse. But when I worked on site, only 70 tons arrived. And the other 30, and she smirked. The other 30 tons were already there. Cheap garbage cement, bought for pennies from shady suppliers. Delivered at night, no paperwork. We'd mix it with your good stuff and get 100 tons. You get what I mean? The price difference went straight into Blackwood's pocket. And it wasn't just cement, same with steel, bricks, panels. He's not building homes. He's building cardboard boxes. And all of it's covered by your quality certificates. Your family's name. I listened, my blood turning cold. The document fraud was just the surface, a way to hide something much worse. The real crime was on the construction sites. He was building homes out of junk, putting hundreds, maybe thousands of lives at risk. And our company, Wyeth Supply, was his shield. On paper, we were the suppliers of top-grade materials. If something collapsed, if people died, it would be on us. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you go public? I asked, though deep down, I already knew the answer. I did, he spat. Went to him when I realized it stank of prison time. Told him I wouldn't be part of it. So he set me up. Framed me for theft, fired me, and then threatened that if I said a word, I'd rot in jail. He's got people everywhere, girl. Police. Prosecutors. I tried to push back once, and they made it real clear how things work. Since then, I keep my mouth shut. Life's worth more. He spat on the ground, so you'd better stay out of it too. He'll chew you up and not even notice. Is he working on anything big right now? I asked, my heart tightening with dread. Carson gave me a look. Oh yeah. His pride and joy. The city's favorite project. The papers can't shut up about it. He paused, and each word that followed hit me like a hammer. They're building a new school. In the Riverside district. Grand opening in 2 months, just in time for September 1st. And you can bet he's using the same crap there. And the supplier? Of course, it's Wyeth Supply. If that building collapses, you and your old man are the ones who'll take the fall. I stared at Carson, but all I could see in my mind were children, first day of school, ribbons, balloons, and above them, a building made of trash, ready to crumble. And under that rubble, my family's name. Thank you, I managed, then turned and walked toward my car. Hey, Wyeth, he shouted after me. You didn't hear any of this. You never saw me. Got it? I nodded without turning back, got into the car, and drove off. This was no longer about business or revenge. Children's lives were at stake. And I had only 2 months. I couldn't use Carson's words. They were just the claims of a bitter man against the word of Malcolm Blackwood, the city's golden boy. No one would believe me. The documents I had could be dismissed too, called a clerical mistake, a system glitch, anything. I needed something undeniable. Something solid. Something I could hold, test, and prove. I needed a sample. A sample of that cheap counterfeit cement, that rusted rebar Malcolm was using on his sites. If I could prove that the chemical composition of the materials didn't match the quality certificates issued under our company's name, it would be explosive. Hard, scientific proof of fraud on a massive scale. But where would I get a sample? Sneak into the school construction site? Impossible. Guards, cameras, I'd be caught in minutes. Then I remembered what Carson had said. They brought it in at night, no paperwork. They had to bring it somewhere. They had to store it somewhere. Malcolm didn't have his own warehouses large enough for that kind of volume. He always used ours. My mind started racing. Our company rented several massive warehouses in the industrial zone. The main one, warehouse number 1, was the largest. That's where we stored all incoming materials before shipping them out to construction sites. Everyone knew that Malcolm, as our key partner, had almost unlimited access to that warehouse. He often left his own materials there temporarily. It was considered normal practice. What if he was storing that garbage right under our noses? In our warehouse? It would be the height of arrogance, and exactly like him. Using our own resources to commit crimes against us. I had to get inside that warehouse. At night, when it was empty, I still had an old set of keys to all the offices and storage areas. I was supposed to return them after being fired, but Bella, drunk on her victory, hadn't even thought to ask for them. They were still in my desk drawer at home. The plan was insane. If I got caught, it would be over. Breaking and entering, trespassing on private property, it would fit perfectly into their story of my instability. But I had no choice. I waited for nightfall. 1 a.m. The city was silent. I dressed in dark clothes, grabbed a small backpack, a flashlight, heavy-duty sample bags, a hammer, and a chisel. From the tool drawer, I also took a hand drill with a thin bit. If the cement was in sealed bags, I could drill out a bit without breaking the seal. I drove my car close but parked a few blocks away, in a dark alley. Then I walked the rest of the way. The industrial zone at night was eerie. The wind moaned through power lines, dogs barked somewhere in the distance. The warehouse complex was surrounded by a tall concrete fence, but I knew one spot where the slabs had sunk just enough. I slipped through the gap. There it was, warehouse number 1. Huge, like an airplane hangar. My heart was pounding in my throat. I pulled out the keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the side door lock. It turned with a loud metallic scrape that sliced through the silence. I froze, listening. Nothing. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. I flicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, rows and rows of shelves stretching into the shadows. Mountains of cement bags, stacks of bricks, rolls of rebar. The air smelled of dust and damp concrete. I knew exactly where to go, the far corner of the warehouse. They called it the Blackwood Zone. That's where materials for his projects were always stored. I moved quietly, my footsteps echoing faintly. There it was. Pallets of cement bags, neatly stacked, bearing the logo of our usual, trusted supplier. At first glance, everything looked normal. But I knew better. I picked one bag from the middle of the stack and set it on the floor. I spread out a plastic bag on the concrete, took out the drill, and pressed the bit to the side of the bag. This was it. Proof. I pressed the button. The drill whirred softly, biting into the thick paper and compacted powder. Gray dust spilled into my bag. Just a few more seconds. And suddenly, the entire warehouse exploded with light. Floodlights on the ceiling blazed to life, blinding me. I threw up a hand to shield my face. The drill slipped from my fingers and crashed to the floor. When my eyes adjusted, I saw them. Standing at the main doors, now wide open, were Malcolm and Bella. They didn't look surprised. Or alarmed. They looked triumphant. Cold, viciously triumphant, predators staring down the trapped prey. And behind them stood 2 police officers. I froze, clutching the useless bag of cement dust. My mind couldn't process it. How? How did they know? Bella stepped forward and spoke, her voice loud, trembling with fake emotion. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the police. There. See? I told you she's completely lost it. She's trying to destroy our family business. She's tampering with the stock. Thank God we got here in time. I was so afraid for her. She went on, and I stared at her face, at Malcolm's smug grin just behind her, and it hit me like ice water. They hadn't caught me by accident. The alarm hadn't gone off. I knew it didn't. The night guard hadn't called them. They'd been waiting for me. They knew I'd come. They knew why I'd come. This wasn't chance. It was a setup. A perfect trap. And I'd walked right into it. They hadn't just caught me, they'd staged everything. They had witnesses, motive, evidence, the perfect crime, the revenge of the crazy sister. The police stepped toward me. The younger one looked at me with pity. The older one, with a tired, cynical face, bent down and picked up the drill from the floor. "Well, miss," he said, "care to explain what you're doing here at 2 a.m? What could I say? That I was gathering evidence of fraud? That my fiancé and sister were criminals?" They'd laughed me out of the room. It was a perfect picture, the disgraced daughter of the owner, sneaking into the warehouse at night, caught damaging company property. Motive check. Evidence right there in my hands. Witnesses standing 10 feet away, dripping with fake sympathy. "I didn't damage anything," I said weakly, my voice sounding pathetic even to me. "I just wanted to take a sample." "A sample of what?" the older officer sneered. "Cement for some home repairs? Don't make me laugh." They twisted my arms behind my back and snapped the handcuffs on. The cold metal burned my wrists. They led me toward the exit, past Malcolm and Bella. Malcolm looked at me with an expression of deep disappointment, like I'd broken his heart. And Bella? She stepped closer as the officers pulled me past. "I'm sorry, sis," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "But you brought this on yourself. You should have stayed out of things that weren't your business." There wasn't a trace of regret in her voice, only cold satisfaction. They shoved me into the back of the police car. Then came the station, the questioning, the paperwork. I kept repeating the same thing: I'm innocent. I was set up. The investigator, a young man with tired eyes, listened, nodded occasionally, but I could tell he didn't believe me. To him, it was simple: a family feud gone too far. The charges were serious: illegal entry, attempted destruction of property on a large scale, corporate sabotage. It sounded absurd, but behind that absurdity were real criminal codes. They took me to a holding cell. A small, foul-smelling room with a metal bench. The door clanged shut, and I was alone. I sat on the cold bench, buried my face in my hands. This was the end. Complete and final. Now I wasn't just a crazy daughter in my family's eyes. I was a criminal. They had one. They'd planned everything, every move, every word. They'd trapped me, and now all that was left was for them to finish me off. I don't know how long I sat there. Time didn't exist in that cell. I thought about my father. What would happen when he found out? The news would kill him. Bella and Malcolm would finally get everything they wanted, while I, his daughter, rotted in jail and dragged his name through the mud. In the morning, the door opened. The same tired officer from the night before. "Wyeth, you're up." They led me back to the investigator's office. He looked even more exhausted than yesterday. "I've got bad news," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Last night your father, Warren Wyeth, suffered a heart attack. He's in intensive care at City Hospital. Conditions critical." The floor seemed to vanish under me. I gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. It was me. I'd done this. My arrest, my actions, it was the final blow. Can I see him?" I whispered. The investigator shook his head. Not aloud. He paused, then sighed. Maybe some small part of him still had compassion. "But you're entitled to one phone call. You can call the hospital, ask about his condition." He pushed an old phone toward me. My fingers wouldn't cooperate. I barely managed to dial the number for the hospital's information desk. They connected me to the cardiac ICU. I gave my name and asked about my father. A nurse answered, her voice gentle and sympathetic. She said his condition was stable but critical, and that he was unconscious. I was about to hang up, crushed by the news, when I suddenly heard her voice again. "Wait, I think he's waking up. He's trying to say something. Hold on." I heard muffled sounds, whispers, movement. I clutched the phone like it was the last lifeline I had. "I'll hold the receiver to his ear," the nurse said. Maybe he can hear you. But just for a moment, and then I heard it. It wasn't really a voice, it was more like a rasp. A faint, broken whisper, strained and distant, as if coming from behind a curtain of pain. Jackie, sweetheart. Dad. Dad, I'm here. I can hear you. I cried into the phone, tears spilling down my face. Listen, he whispered, every word soaked in effort. Listen to me. I held my breath. The investigator looked up. And then my father said four words that made no sense but burned into my memory forever. Your mother, her journals, the country house. Then came a commotion on the line, the nurse's alarmed voice. That's enough, he can't talk anymore. The call disconnected. Just a dead tone in my ear. I sat there, staring at the phone. What? What did that mean? Your mother. Her journals. The country house. Mom had died 5 years ago. What journals? She'd never kept any. And the country house, we hadn't been there in years. It was abandoned. It made no sense. The rambling of a dying man, maybe, but why those words? He'd fought to say them. Used the last of his strength. That couldn't be meaningless. Even on the edge of death, my father wouldn't ramble about an old house. It wasn't nonsense. It was a message. A clue. The last thing he could give me. His final way to help me when every other door had been slammed shut. I put the receiver down, and his words echoed in my mind. Your mother. Her journals. The country house. Just then, the door opened, and a man walked in, an older lawyer, gray-haired, weary-looking. Miriam had sent him. She was probably the only person still on my side. The lawyer spoke briefly with the investigator, then with me. He said the case looked bad, but he'd figure something out. Malcolm and Bella had filed a massive claim for property damage. The amount was huge enough that I could have been held in custody until trial. But he'd posted bail. How Miriam came up with that kind of money, I had no idea. They released me under a travel ban. I walked out of the police station on shaking legs. The morning sun stabbed at my eyes. I was free, for now. But I had no idea what to do next. The charges still stood. My father was in the hospital. The company was in enemy hands. And yet I had something. 4 words. Fragile, crazy, but still, hope. My first and only thought was the country house. I didn't go home. I didn't call anyone. I got in the car and drove out of the city. Our old country house was an hour away. We stopped going there after Mom died. For my father, that place was soaked with too many painful memories. The house had been abandoned, the garden swallowed by weeds. I pulled up by the crooked fence. The gate was locked with a rusty padlock, but I knew there was a hole in the fence. I squeezed through it, just like I did as a kid. The house looked desolate. Peeling paint, boarded up windows on the first floor. I walked around to the old terrace. The door was locked, but I remembered Mom always hid a spare key under a chipped stone by the steps. I bent down, brushed through the tall grass, and my fingers found cold metal. The key turned in the lock with a harsh scrape. I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust, dampness, and abandonment. Dim light filtered through the cracks between the boards. The furniture was covered with white sheets like ghostly shrouds. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Everything was frozen in time, the day we left it behind. What was I even looking for? Journals. But where? I started searching. I didn't know what exactly I was looking for or what they would look like. I went through everything, bookshelves, drawers, boxes, cabinets. Hours passed. The sun began to set, and the house sank into darkness. I was ready to give up. Maybe I'd misunderstood everything. Maybe it was just delirium. The last place I hadn't checked was my parents' bedroom upstairs. I climbed the creaky stairs. Everything there was the same, dust and silence. The large bed covered with a white sheet. Mom's old vanity with a dull mirror, and a massive wooden wardrobe against the wall. I opened it. Inside hung old clothes, smelling of dust. I checked every shelf. Nothing. Despair rose in my throat. I sank to the floor, leaning against the wardrobe, and that's when I felt it. One of the floorboards beneath the rug shifted strangely. I pulled back the edge of the faded rug. The board wasn't nailed down. It moved when I pressed it. I dug my nails under it, then used an old screwdriver I'd found in the desk drawer. The board came loose. Underneath was a hidden compartment, a small hollow in the floor. Inside it sat a metal box, like a document case, with a tiny lock. It was closed. I shook it gently. Something inside rolled dully from side to side. I jammed the screwdriver into the lock and hit it a few times. The lid gave way with a screech. I opened it. Inside weren't documents or jewelry, just several thick notebooks with hard covers. I picked one up. On the cover, written in my mother's neat, painfully familiar handwriting, was 1990. My mother's handwriting. Her journals. I sat on the floor, leaned against the wall, turned on my phone's flashlight, and started to read. The first entries were happy ones: her wedding, my birth, my first steps, my first words. She wrote with so much love and tenderness. I read and cried. I'd never known her like this. To me, she'd always been distant, quiet, lost in her thoughts. I opened the next notebook. The dates changed, and so did her tone. The happiness faded. Worry appeared. Then pain. She wrote about how my father started coming home late, how he grew distant, like a stranger. And then I found the entry that made my blood run cold. Today I found out. He has another woman. And they have a child. A girl. She's almost a year old. The pages that followed were filled with pain, despair, humiliation. Sleepless nights, tears, her world collapsing. She wrote about wanting to leave but staying, for me, and for the business they had just begun to build together. She decided to endure it. 2 years later, another entry. Short. Terrifying. That woman died. A car accident. The girl survived. Today Warren brought her into our home. He said we'll raise her as our own. He named her Bella. The notebook slipped from my hands. My flashlight rolled away, its beam trembling across the ceiling. Bella. My sister. I grabbed the next notebook, flipping through the pages feverishly. The truth unfolded before me, dark and twisted. Bella was my father's daughter. But not my mother's. She was my half-sister. Mom wrote about how she really tried, to love that child, a living reminder of her husband's betrayal. But she couldn't. She fed her, dressed her, cared for her. But her writing carried a polite, icy distance. She never called her daughter. Only Bella, or that girl. She's nothing like Jackie, Mom wrote. There's something wild in her, something foreign. She looks at me like a little wolf. I see that woman's eyes in hers. Warren spoils her with gifts, trying to atone for his guilt. But she only reaches for him and acts like I don't exist. She feels it. Children always do. I sat in that dusty, dark room, and my whole life, my whole past, turned upside down. Bella's constant jealousy, her rivalry, her desperate hunger for my father's attention, it all suddenly made sense. She didn't just envy me. She'd always felt like an outsider. Unwanted. Illegitimate. And my mother's grief, her quiet rejection, had reminded her of it every single day. Her hatred toward me, her need to destroy everything my father loved, it had been growing for years, fed by that buried secret. I sat on the cold floor until dawn, reading those journals page after page, year after year. I saw our childhood through my mother's eyes, and it felt like watching a horror movie about a family I thought I knew. Now everything made sense. Bella's actions weren't just driven by envy, they were revenge. Revenge for the secret of her birth. For the mother she never knew. for the love she was never given. She wasn't after the company. She wanted to burn to ashes everything that bore my father's name. To destroy what he loved most, his life's work, and his first daughter. And Malcolm? He was just a tool. A perfect one, greedy, ruthless, and willing to do anything for money. I finished reading the last notebook. My hands were numb, my eyes ached from tears and the weak glow of my flashlight. I carefully put the journals back into the metal box. This was more than just an explanation for Bella's actions. This was a weapon. As I flipped through one of the last notebooks, a passage caught my eye, something I hadn't noticed before. Mom wrote about my father's constant guilt. Warren went to see them again. Brought money. He calls it a debt of honor. He's paying that woman's family to keep quiet. Her brother, some shady guy named Harper, keeps squeezing him for more. Warren's terrified they'll twist the story and ruin him. He's paying for their silence, for his past. Harper. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I took a photo of the page on my phone. I drove back to the city exhausted but with a clear head. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't go home. I went to the only person I could still trust, Miriam. She lived in an old townhouse downtown. When she opened the door, she gasped. I must have looked awful, covered in dust, red-eyed, sleepless. Without asking anything, she led me to the kitchen and poured me a cup of hot tea. I didn't show her the journals, it felt too personal. I just said, Miriam, I need to find out something. You've worked with my father from the very beginning. You must remember. I showed her the photo of the diary page on my phone. This name, Harper. Does it mean anything to you? Miriam put on her glasses, squinted at the screen, and her face changed. She went pale. Taking off her glasses, she looked at me for a long, heavy moment. Where did you get this, Jackie? That's not important right now. Do you remember these people? She nodded slowly. I remember. How could I not? It was a long time ago, more than 30 years. Warren was just starting out back then. The Harpers, they were family to one of his acquaintances. Bad bunch. They had a terrible reputation in town, petty crooks and con artists. Her brother, Royston Harper, did time more than once for fraud. When that woman died, he came to Warren, demanding money. Blackmail. Warren paid him for years, afraid they'd hurt you or Bella. So Mom had been telling the truth. Bella hadn't come from nowhere. She had a family with a criminal past. What happened to them? The Harpers? I asked. Miriam shrugged. No idea. Once the company took off, Warren bought them off for good. Paid them a large sum to disappear from his life. I never heard of them again. I assumed they'd left town. I sat there, my mind spinning like crazy. A criminal past. Fraud. Blackmail. It all fit too perfectly. Bella wasn't alone. She had backing, her family. Miriam, I said, a wild but logical thought forming in my head. Can you remember which lab certifies the materials Blackwood supplies? The quality certificates, the inspection reports, who issues them? Miriam frowned, thinking. She was an accountant, not in logistics, but her memory was sharp as ever. Let me think, it's always the same company. A new one, opened about 2 years ago. Build Test Pro. Supposed to be the best in town, with top-notch equipment. Malcolm insisted we trust only their reports. Build Test Pro, I repeated. Can you find out who owns it? Of course, she said. That's public information. Give me a minute. She went into the next room where her computer was. I could hear her typing. I sat in the kitchen, barely breathing. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Everything was pointing to the same place. I felt it. I was standing on the edge of the final, terrifying truth. 5 minutes later, Miriam came back. She was holding a printed sheet. Her hands were trembling. Without a word, she laid it on the table in front of me. I looked down. It was a business registry extract. Build Test Pro. Under CEO and sole owner, the name read Royston Harper. Bella's uncle. The small-time con artist from the past. I stared at the name, and the entire picture snapped into place. This wasn't just Malcolm and Bella's scheme. It was a family operation, a deeply rooted, perfectly constructed conspiracy. The lab that was supposed to test material quality and protect against fraud was owned by Bella's family. They were the ones creating the fake certificates for the garbage materials Malcolm bought dirt cheap. They weren't just accomplices, they were the backbone of the whole operation. They gave him credibility, covering his crimes with the seal of official inspection. And in return, he helped them bleed my father dry, destroying his life's work, while Bella avenged her broken childhood. Bella, Malcolm, her conman uncle, they were all part of the same diseased organism. Jackie, what are you going to do? Miriam's whisper snapped me out of it. We have to take this to the police. Right now. I shook my head slowly. The police? Miriam, you said it yourself, Harper's a criminal. He knows how to make problems disappear. And Malcolm, after what happened with that journalist, I know he's got people everywhere. They'll bury this case. Or worse, they'll twist it so it looks like I forged the documents to get revenge. I already have sabotage charges hanging over me. One more accusation, and I'm done. I stood up and started pacing the small kitchen. My thoughts were racing. I couldn't keep working in the shadows. My quiet investigations, my pleas to my father, my anonymous letters, all of it had failed. They were stronger, smarter, dirtier, and they had allies. That meant I had to change the rules. I had to drag them into the light. Into the bright, merciless light where money and influence meant nothing. I didn't need the police. I needed a stage. And an audience. The whole city had to see it. But how do you force monsters to step onto the stage? And then I remembered him. Owen Burton. The journalist who had betrayed me so easily. The one who took my evidence and turned it into a glowing article praising Malcolm. I hated him. But he was my only chance. My key. Because he was already involved, even if he didn't realize it yet. Miriam, I need his number. Burton's personal number. Miriam looked at me in shock. Jackie, why? He works for Blackwood. He'll betray you again. Last time, I gave him a choice between money and the truth, and he chose money, I said, my voice hard as steel. This time, I'll give him a choice between fame and prison. Believe me, he'll pick fame. I had to get this right. Prepare for the conversation like it was my final battle. I went home. For the first time in days, I showered, changed into clean clothes, and laid out all my cards on the table, copies of invoices from Miriam, a photo from an old album, the registry extract for Harper's Company, and, most importantly, a printed copy of Burton's flattering article about Malcolm. I called him from the same burner phone. He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was sharp, irritated. Yeah? Owen, it's Jackie Wyeth. Silence. I could hear him breathing. I thought we were done, he said coldly. I've got nothing else to say to you. Well, I've got something to say to you, I replied evenly. This isn't about business. It's about the new school in Riverside. And about the lives of the kids who will walk into it on September 1st. Meet me in an hour. Old Court Cafe, on the outskirts. If you don't show up, I'll take that as a formal refusal to receive information of critical public importance. My next call will be to the district attorney's office. I have proof that you knew about Blackwood's fraudulent schemes and chose to cover them up. Think about that. I hung up before he could respond. It was a bluff. The DA's office wouldn't even take my call. But the word cover-up was enough to scare him. The Old Court Cafe was nearly empty, dark, unwelcoming, the kind of place that made you want to leave fast. I took a seat at the very back. He arrived 10 minutes late, scanning the room before walking toward me. His face was a mix of irritation and curiosity. "What's this circus, Jackie?" he said, sitting across from me. "What kids? What DA? Are you trying to blackmail me?" I slid a printed copy of his article across the table. "This, Owen," I said quietly, "was a mistake. Not mine. Yours. You thought you were just doing a favor for a powerful man and getting a fat paycheck. But you didn't just write a lie. You became an accomplice." He gave a dry laugh. "An accomplice to what? Bad management at your family company? To a crime that could kill people?" I looked straight into his eyes, unblinking. "Blackwood is building a new school using cheap, low-quality materials. Instead of high-grade cement, he's using trash. Instead of proper rebar, rusted scrap metal. And all of it's covered by fake safety certificates from a lab that doesn't even exist. A lab owned by the uncle of his lover. My sister, Bella." I spoke calmly, and as I did, I watched his confident smirk fade away. "That's a serious accusation." "Do you have proof?" he asked, his tone suddenly cautious. "I have everything." I spread the papers across the table. "Here's the trail of embezzlement. Here's proof of their decade-long connection. And here," I slid the printout toward him, the cherry on top, the registry extract for Build Test Pro, the lab issuing all his certifications. "Read it." He picked up the page. His eyes scanned the lines. I saw sweat bead on his forehead. He understood. He was no fool. He realized just how deep he was in. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Now you do," I cut him off. "And now you have a choice. A very simple one. When that school collapses, and it will, it's only a matter of time, there will be a massive investigation. And I promise you, the first thing I'll do is tell the investigators that I personally warned you, Owen Burton, the famous investigative journalist, months before the tragedy. I'll show them the anonymous letter I sent you. And then you'll go from witness to defendant. Concealment of evidence, criminal negligence, complicity. You'll go to prison, Owen. Right alongside Blackwood." I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. He sat pale as a ghost, staring at the table. "But there's another option," I continued, my voice softening. "You can do what you should have done the first time. Conduct a real investigation. Write the story of your life. A story that won't just shake this city, it'll make you a hero. The man who saved hundreds of children's lives. The choice is yours, Owen. Hero or accomplice to a killer." He was silent for a long time. He stared at the papers, then at me, then out the window. What do you want from me?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "An article alone won't be enough," I said. "He'll brush it off. Say it's fake, a hit piece from his competitors. He's too rich, too connected. We need him destroyed publicly, instantly, before he has a chance to defend himself." "How?" "We'll play on his weakness." I leaned across the table toward him. "And his biggest weakness is vanity. He loves attention. He sees himself as the king of the city. So let's give him what he wants." I told him my plan, the one that had taken shape in my sleepless mind over the past 24 hours. Burton listened, and I watched the fear on his face slowly turn into excitement, the thrill of a hunter who just spotted the biggest prey of his life. "This is insane," he said when I finished. "But it's brilliant." The next week, the preparations began. We worked like real conspirators. Using his newspaper's connections and a fake organization called the Builders Association, Owen announced the launch of the Developer of the Year award, the city's most prestigious business event of the fall. Elegant invitations were printed. Burton personally called every member of the city's elite, the mayor, politicians, bankers, CEOs. He promised them an evening at the luxurious Grand Palace Hotel, fine food, champagne, and, most importantly, networking with the powerful. No one declined. The key moment came when he called Malcolm. Owen made the call himself. I sat beside him in his car, listening on speakerphone. "Malcolm, good afternoon." Owen Burton, City Herald, he said in his most charming tone. I'm calling with wonderful news. This year, our expert committee unanimously selected you as Developer of the Year. Congratulations. There was a pause on the line, then Malcolm's self-satisfied laugh echoed through the car. Well, I'll be damned. That's a surprise. And a pleasant one. Thank you, Owen. I always knew you were a man who recognizes true excellence. The award ceremony will be next Saturday at the Grand Palace, Owen continued. The mayor himself will be there to present the award. We'd love for you to prepare a short acceptance speech, 5 minutes or so. About your values, social responsibility, family, all that good stuff. Of course, Malcolm said, glowing with delight. I'll make it unforgettable. This will be my night. When Owen hung up, he looked at me and grinned. He swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. The whole week we built our stage. Owen handled the logistics, the hotel, the guest list, the press. I worked on my speech. I knew I'd only have a few minutes before security dragged me off stage, so every word had to strike like a bullet. Miriam, who was in on the plan, helped me organize the financial documents into clear, undeniable charts. The night before the ceremony, I sat in my apartment rehearsing my speech in front of the mirror. I was calm. The pain and fear were gone. Only cold determination remained. This was my only chance. All or nothing. By Saturday evening, the ballroom of the Grand Palace was packed. The air smelled of expensive perfume and power. Soft music played while waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. I arrived late, dressed simply, in a dark dress, and took a quiet spot in the back corner. Then Malcolm walked in, with Bella on his arm. He wore a flawless tuxedo, she shimmered in a sequin gown. They glowed. He was the king of the night, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, basking in the admiration. Everyone looked at him with awe, the hero, the Developer of the Year. I looked around the glittering room, the smiling guests, the stage with 2 microphones, the massive banner that read Developer of the Year. City Herald Awards. And I realized what a lie it all was. There was no annual award. No expert committee. The entire glamorous event existed for one purpose, for him. On paper, it was the city's most prestigious gala. In reality, it was an execution stage, one that Burton and I had built together. And Malcolm was walking toward it proudly, unaware. I stood in the shadows, watching him. He was in his element, moving smoothly from one group to another, radiating charm. His laugh was loud, his gestures confident. He was on top of the world. Bella followed him like a shadow. She smiled, nodded, played her role perfectly. But now that I knew the truth, I saw what others couldn't. Her smile trembled slightly. She gripped her champagne glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for danger. Victory was close, but it didn't bring her joy. It terrified her. As long as they had a common enemy, me and my father, they were united, bound by a shared goal. But now, with victory within reach, everything had changed. I saw it in the way Malcolm introduced her, my lovely companion, Bella. Not partner. Not co-owner. Just companion. A beautiful accessory for his big night. Bella felt it too. She realized she was no longer his ally, she was a liability. A dangerous witness who knew too much. All those years of vengeance, the grand plan she'd built, they had all led to this, crowning a man who could now discard her at any moment. And she was terrified. The official part of the evening began. Owen Burton, playing the role of the host, stepped onto the stage. He spoke in general terms about the growth of the regional construction industry, thanked a few sponsors he had entirely made up. The audience listened politely, but no one really cared, they were waiting for the main event. I saw Malcolm and Bella take their seats at a front row table. He leaned back, smiling smugly. She sat straight as a rod, tense like a coiled wire. And now, Burton announced, the highlight of our evening. To present the main award, Developer of the Year, please welcome the mayor of our city. The mayor, a plump, self-important man, climbed onto the stage to a wave of applause. He took the microphone and began reading a pre-written speech praising Malcolm, his contribution, his vision, his commitment to social responsibility. That's when I noticed Bella lean toward Malcolm, whispering something quickly. He frowned, shook his head. She said something again, more firmly. He snapped back at her, irritation flashing across his face. She stood up abruptly and headed toward the exit, straight for the service hallway behind the stage. Malcolm glared after her but stayed put. He couldn't miss his big moment. His triumph was seconds away. Something was happening. Their alliance was cracking, right there, right in front of everyone. And now, the mayor declared proudly, "It is my honor to present the Developer of the Year award to the head of Blackwood Construction, Mr. Malcolm Blackwood." The room erupted in applause. Malcolm rose, straightened his shoulders, adjusted his bow tie, and walked to the stage with a regal smile. As the audience's attention turned to him, I slipped quietly out into the corridor. I didn't know what Bella was planning, but I needed to see it. The hallway behind the stage was dim and empty. I heard muffled voices coming from behind the dressing room door. I crept closer and listened. It was them. "Are you out of your mind? Picking a fight 5 minutes before my speech?" Malcolm hissed. "Your speech? Your triumph?" Bella's voice trembled with fury. "Where am I in all this, Malcolm? You promised that once we took control of my father's company, we'd make it official. 50-50. Where are the papers?" He laughed, a cold, cruel laugh. "Papers? Sweetheart, what are you talking about? Did you really think I'd hand you half of a multi-million-dollar business? You were useful. You played your role well. But the show's over. Thanks for your service. Sweetheart." The word cut through me like glass. I remembered my mother's diary. She had written that was what my father called his mistress, Bella's mother. It wasn't affection. It was contempt. And Malcolm knew that. He used it deliberately, to wound her. You can't do this to me." Bella's voice cracked. "I did everything for you. I betrayed my family. I broke the law." "Exactly," he said coldly. "You committed a crime. I'm a respected man, Developer of the Year. Who do you think they'll believe if you decide to open that pretty little mouth of yours? You'll sink, sweetheart. I'll stay afloat. So be smart, go back to the hall, smile, and clap when your master accepts his award. Maybe I'll even let you keep that Phoenix Tower apartment as a consolation prize." Silence followed, heavy, suffocating silence. I could hear only Bella's shaky breathing. He had destroyed her. Crushed her completely. 10 years of her life, her carefully built revenge, all of it had led to this moment. Malcolm taking everything, and her left with nothing. She had never been a partner. Just a disposable tool. And now he was discarding her. The door flew open. Malcolm stepped out, adjusting his jacket. He didn't see me. I slipped into the shadows. He walked past me, calm and confident, and disappeared backstage. A second later, his voice came through the speakers in the corridor. His acceptance speech had begun. I peeked into the dressing room. Bella stood in the middle of the room, her back to me. Her shoulders were trembling. Then she slowly turned around. Her face was twisted, not just with anger, but pure, burning hatred. Her makeup had run, but her eyes blazed with feverish fire. She saw me. And she didn't look surprised. It was as if she had expected me all along. She took a few steps toward me, and something glinted in her hand, a small flash drive. "I've been recording everything," she whispered, almost to herself. "Every conversation. Just in case. I thought it might be my insurance." She looked down at the flash drive in her palm, then up at me. Her face hardened into a cold, furious mask. "He thinks he's won. That he'll get everything, my father's legacy, the company, the money, the fame." She stepped closer until she was right in front of me. Her eyes were wild. "He'll get nothing," she hissed. Her voice sounded like a snake's. She grabbed my hand and pressed the flash drive into my palm. The metal felt icy. None of us will let him win. Not you. Not me. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't reconciliation. It was vengeance, final and desperate. If she couldn't win, she would make sure no one did. Especially him. Bella, the architect of my downfall, the one who had destroyed my life piece by piece, had just handed me a weapon. A weapon powerful enough to destroy them both. She had given me the recordings of every conversation, every step of their 10-year conspiracy. I clenched the flash drive in my hand. Bella turned and walked quickly down the corridor toward the back exit. She didn't look back. She fled the battlefield, leaving a nuclear bomb behind. From the hall, Malcolm's voice carried over the speakers. He was talking about honor. About integrity. About how important it was to build not just homes, but the future. About how grateful he was to the Wyeth family for their trust and support. Every word was a lie. And the entire hall, the city's finest, listened to him in awe and believed every single one. I took a deep breath. Cold determination filled me. It was over. No more fear, no more doubts, just this small piece of plastic and metal in my hand, and the stage waiting ahead. I stepped out from behind the curtains and walked along the wall toward the stage. No one paid attention to me. Every eye was fixed on him, their hero. And finally, Malcolm was saying, his voice smooth and confident, I want to talk about what truly matters, family values. Family gives us strength. It's for our loved ones that we achieve our greatest victories. My family is my foundation. And I'm happy to say that soon, my family will grow even bigger. He paused, sweeping the audience with a proud smile. He was looking for Bella but didn't find her. His speech ended to thunderous applause. The mayor handed him a heavy glass trophy. He lifted it high above his head like a champion. And that's when I walked onto the stage. I didn't rush. I walked slowly, steadily, past the stunned mayor, past Malcolm, whose smile froze on his face. I stopped at the second microphone standing beside him. The room went silent. The applause faded. Every gaze turned to me. Hundreds of eyes. I saw confusion, shock. I saw Malcolm's triumphant expression twist into anger and fear. Jackie, what the hell are you doing? He hissed into his mic, but I ignored him. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd turned away from me not long ago. I saw Owen Burton by the wall, pale as a ghost. And then, in the front row, I hadn't noticed him at first, sat my father, in his wheelchair. Miriam stood beside him. He looked weak, exhausted, but he was there. And he was watching me. I gripped the microphone. My hands were steady. Good evening, I said, my voice loud and clear, echoing through the hall. My name is Jackie Wyeth. And I'd like to congratulate Mr. Blackwood on this well-deserved award, an award for deceit. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The security guards at the edge of the stage tensed but didn't move. They were waiting for a signal, but none came. Tonight, Mr. Blackwood spoke about family values, I continued, locking eyes with him. So let me tell you a family story. A story about 10 years of betrayal. Malcolm opened his mouth, but I spoke louder. This story began 10 years ago, when a young, ambitious businessman named Malcolm Blackwood met the younger daughter of his business partner, Bella Wyeth. They started a secret affair. But it wasn't just love. They had a plan to take over her father's company. And for that, they needed me. The older daughter. The heir. Malcolm courted me for 4 years. He proposed to me. He gained my father's trust. And all that time, he was sleeping with my sister. You could hear a pin drop. The entire room was frozen. Their plan was simple, use me to gain access to our company, then destroy it from the inside. For years, they kept double books, forged invoices, created fake debts under our name. They slandered me, made me look insane. They forged medical papers to remove my father from his own business when he was barely clinging to life. That's a lie. Malcolm shouted into his mic, she's not well. She was fired for erratic behavior. Security, get her off this stage. But that's not all, I cut him off. Their biggest crime is happening right now. They're building a new school for our children, using cheap, unsafe materials that won't survive the first winter. And they're covering it up with fake safety certificates issued by Build Test Pro, a company owned by Bella's uncle, Royston Harper, a convicted criminal. The mention of Harper's name made a few people in the room flinch. He was remembered in this city. This is slander. Malcolm's face turned crimson. You have no proof. You're wrong, Malcolm, I said calmly. I have everything. I looked to the back of the hall, toward the sound booth, where Owen stood. I gave him a small nod. And then, through the speakers that moments ago had been playing soft music, came a voice. Bella's voice. We agreed that after we took control of my father's company, we'd make it official. 50-50. Then came Malcolm's laugh. Did you really think I'd give you half of a multi-million-dollar business? You were useful. You played your role well. But the show's over. The audience gasped. Malcolm froze, his face white as chalk. He looked from the speakers to me, horrified, furious. And the recording continued. Owen switched to another clip. The old man's almost done. A few more scandals and he'll be gone. Then everything will be ours, Malcolm's voice said. And what about the materials for the school? Won't that blow up in our faces? Bella asked. Relax. Harper can forge whatever paperwork we need. Who's going to check? The main thing is to cut the ribbon on time. After that, who cares? That was enough. The effect was like a bomb going off. One of Malcolm's biggest investors shot up from his seat, knocking over his chair. Blackwood. Our project's finished. My lawyers will be in touch tomorrow, he shouted, storming toward the exit. The mayor, still on stage, quickly stepped down, muttering into his phone as he hurried out. Others followed, politicians, bankers, businessmen, all walking out, turning their faces away from the stage in disgust, as if from something contagious. I saw Bella. She was standing by the exit, trying to slip out unnoticed. But the same people who had smiled at her an hour ago now stepped aside, forming a passageway. No one shouted. No one insulted her. They just silently turned their backs. It was a wall of cold contempt. Social death. She froze for a moment, her eyes darting desperately around the room, then covered her face with her hands and ran out. Malcolm stood on stage like a statue. His triumph had turned to ashes in 5 minutes. He looked out at the emptying hall, at the wreckage of his own life. He was finished. Then I heard a voice. Strong. Clear. My father's voice. With effort, leaning on Miriam's arm, he rose from his wheelchair. He wasn't looking at Malcolm. He was looking at me. That's my daughter, he said, his voice ringing through the hall, firm, proud, unshakable. Jackie Wyeth. The true head of the Wyeth family, and of our company. I stood alone on that stage, surrounded by the ruins of someone else's lies. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel pain or fear. I felt peace. I had reclaimed more than the company. I had reclaimed my name, my honor, my life. I stepped down from the stage and walked toward my father. He took a step forward to meet me, and we embraced, for the first time in so many years. The next day came the arrests. Malcolm. Harper. A full-scale investigation began. The newspapers and TV channels exploded with the story. But none of that mattered anymore. It was just noise. What mattered was something else. I sat in my father's office, at his desk. He sat across from me, in the visitor's chair. We were going through documents, real ones, trying to figure out the damage that had been done and how to rebuild. There was a lot of work ahead. But we were doing it together. At one point, my father looked up at me. "I'm sorry, Jackie," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." I shook my head. "It's all in the past, Dad. Now we look forward." I picked up a pen and opened his old planner. On a clean page, I wrote today's date. Then I drew a small number 1 beside it. The first day of our new life. And that's how this story ended, a story about betrayal that burned for years, and about the strength of one woman who refused to give up. A complicated, heavy story, isn't it? It makes you think about how deeply wounds can hide within a family and how devastating the consequences can be. About how easily we can be deceived by charm and pretty words. Now that it's all over, it's worth asking, did Jackie do the right thing? On one hand, she fought for the truth, for her father's legacy, and ultimately, for the safety of others. It seemed she had no other choice. But on the other hand, she exposed her family's darkest secrets to the world, destroying her sister publicly, no matter what kind of person she was. Was the victory worth that price? What would you have done in her place? Do you still have questions about the characters? Maybe you're wondering what happened to Bella, or how Jackie and her father's life turned out afterward. Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to read them. If this story touched you, if you felt for Jackie and walked this difficult path with her, please like this video. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new, equally gripping stories. And of course, share your opinion in the comments, your support means the world to us. I wish you all peace and kindness. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. All the very best to you. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the middle of the screen. Click on it to see more of our most fascinating stories.